Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining the Textile webinar series by the Washington State Department of Ecology's Recycling and Market Development Center. The RMDC is a state agency partnership for collaboration to advance market development to prevent and reduce waste. This session is called Fastening the Textile Community, Advocacy and Coalition Building, and is the fourth and final webinar in this series. The purpose of this webinar is to unify and empower stakeholders across levels to advance textile policy and collaboration, driving actionable steps for advocacy and ongoing community engagement in Washington and beyond. My name is T, my pronouns are he, she, they, and I'm honored to have been your host and throughline for this series. Today, I'll be co-hosting this webinar with sustainable fashion advocate, Kathryn Horvath. But before we get started, I wanted to introduce myself and take care of some basic housekeeping. I'm a social entrepreneur working at the intersection of fashion, sustainability, justice, and education. My startup is called Reform You, and we use education as a tool for personal and systemic transformation. We currently offer a course called A Practical Guide to Sustainable Style, and currently I'm working on developing custom GPTs to reduce consumption. So I work more on the demand side of the equation, but we need supply, demand, and policy to work in tandem. So it's great to see people from diverse backgrounds and approaches convening today. We want to encourage radical collaboration, so I hope you all will connect through the chat. I'm also 1/3 of a collective known as Sustainable Style Seattle. We are offering 7 free community events throughout May, sponsored by the City of Seattle's Office of Arts and Culture. So last weekend we did a clothing swap. This coming weekend, we'll be doing a repair and mending workshop. The following weekend is an upcycling workshop. And on the 31st, we'll have a fashion show. And I'd like to personally invite you to attend and share these events with your respective communities. So I'll just share a few links now in the chat. So for some quick housekeeping notes, part of this webinar is being recorded. We will not be recording our breakout sessions to encourage open and honest dialogue. Once the recording has been edited for accessibility, we'll post it on Ecology's YouTube channel and share the link through the Recycling Market Development Center's newsletter and website. If you have questions for the speakers, please use the Q&A box instead of the chat. It helps us keep things organized, and we'll get to as many questions as we can towards the end. However, we only have about 10 minutes for questions for the panelists, so please submit your questions early and use the upvote feature so we can see what questions most people would like to have answered. Again, we encourage you to use the chat to connect to the community, as well as ask each other questions, share reflections, or drop any helpful resources for the group. To respect everyone's privacy, we kindly ask that AI note takers like Otter.ai not be used. While we are recording this session, it's done with clear expectations and limited access. Third-party tools capture information in ways we can't fully monitor, and we want this to be a space people feel comfortable participating in. We'll have a short 5-minute bio break later on, but please take care of yourself whenever you need to. And finally, we'd really appreciate your feedback. We'll drop a short survey link in the chat throughout the session. Your thoughts help us improve and plan future webinars. I'd also like to thank the co-design team. So this 4-part series was made possible through the strategic vision of an invaluable network of partners known as the co-design team, which was recruited by Megan Davis and Maya Kaisers from the RMDC. In addition to all of our incredible panelists and speakers through the series, we'd also like to thank the co-design team for helping us unravel the global complexities of these complex systems and for inciting courage for radical collaboration and taking action. Every voice along the value chain holds a critical perspective in shaping solutions to this undeniable problem. Let's break down silos and build a unified voice for a resilient textile industry here in Washington. Thank you, everyone, again for being here. And with that, I'm honored to present my co-host for today, Kathryn Horvath.
Great. Thank you so much, T. So my name is Kathryn Horvath. I'm an advocate for sustainable fashion. I've been working within my community here in Washington to help educate the public about the environmental impacts of the textile industry and the solutions that we can implement both from consumer and societal levels. And I also work with lawmakers to introduce policy that helps shift us to a more circular textile economy. And I mobilize the public to push brands to make more sustainable commitments. I'm really honored to be part of this co-design team that was organized by the Department of Ecology's Recycling Market Development Center, and I'm very excited to facilitate this panel of lawmakers and industry experts who will be discussing current textile policies around the world. So first, I'll walk through today's agenda. So we are going to begin with our policy panel, and I will introduce our panelists here in a second. But they're going to help us move from a global to a more local perspective to best understand the current state of textile policy and how Washington State specifically can build off of that to implement successful policy in the future. We will have some time at the end to take questions from the audience, so please use that Q&A feature to submit any questions you have throughout the presentations and discussion. After that, we will have a 5-minute bio break before we hear from Megan Davis with the Recycling Market Development Center, who will be sharing her personal story and reflections on how disruption opens up space for community-driven change. And then we will be shifting to the community engagement segment of this webinar series. So we'll be spotlighting different local community members and organizations before jumping into some breakout rooms, which are divided into those subcategories, as you can see. And there we'll be able to speak openly. That section will not be recorded. And just to talk about future collaboration and our next steps, whether you're here in Washington or anywhere else around the world, and how we can all work together and collaborate to really facilitate a successful circular textile economy. So after that, we will have some closing remarks and action steps, and of course, end with that survey that we'll be putting in the link throughout. So that's our agenda for the day. And now I'd like to introduce our panelists. Great. So we're so appreciative, first of all, just for each of these incredible women for generously giving us their time to educate us all about the current state of textile policy and how we can collaborate in the future. So first we have Representative Kristine Reeves from the 30th Legislative District in Washington State. She is a Moses Lake representative and native. She has served in a variety of roles, including the statewide Veterans Constituency Coordinator for U.S. Senator Patty Murray. She has been the Director of Economic Development for the military and defense sector at the State Department of Commerce. And she now owns her own small business where she provides community and economic development expertise that promotes cultural humility as a DEIB approach. We're very honored to have her here today to also speak about her House Bill 1420, which she introduced this last legislative section to help target textile waste. Next, we have McKenna Morrigan, who is a strategic advisor for the solid waste planning and program management at Seattle Public Utilities. In this role, she works to advance state and local policies that help support SPU's vision of zero waste and build a more circular economy. And she also has been involved in crafting and advocating for different producer responsibility policies here in Washington. So she has some great expertise to share. Next, we have Dr. Joanne Brasch, who holds a PhD in textile economics and environmental analysis from the University of California, Davis. And she currently works as the Director of Advocacy at the California Product Stewardship Council, leading projects that promote a circular economy using product stewardship and extended producer responsibility. And she will be able to share some unique insights on California's Senate Bill 707. And finally, we have Marissa Adler, who is a textile circularity consultant who advises brands, governments, and recyclers on sustainable materials management and policy. And she founded the textile circularity practice at RRS and also chairs the New York State Association for Reduction, Reuse, and Recycling's Textile Council. So we're really honored to have her here today to give us that more broad global perspective and national on what the current state of textile policy is. And with that, I will hand it over to Marissa.
Great. Thanks so much for having me here and for hosting this important webinar series. I think focusing on this topic is very timely and there's a lot going on in this sector. So we can move on to my slide deck, I believe. Yep. So I'm just going to give a brief overview and introduction of the state of circular textile policy in the US, and also looking at some global trends. I'm going to stay pretty high level and go kind of fast. So buckle up. We're going to fly through. You can move on to the next. Just by way of background, RRS is a recycling and sustainability consulting firm working on waste and recycling issues and circularity. We've been around for almost 40 years, hence recycle.com is our URL. We got in there early and grabbed up that domain name, and we work across the supply chain, across sectors, really towards minimizing waste and managing our materials responsibly. Next slide. So I'll just start with an overall scene setter, and that is that it is my belief that policy is critical to drive textile recovery. Go to the next one. So looking at the US, we are seeing a lot of activity popping up across several different states that touch on the topic of textile circularity. EPR, for example, extended producer responsibility, we know has passed in California. I'm not going to say much about that because we have the expert Dr. Joanne Brasch, who's going to be talking all about that. We know that it is has been introduced in the state of Washington, and I'm really excited that that is the case. And it is going to be held over until next year's session, from my understanding. So it's going to be a really important coming up to gather stakeholders and bring all the voices together and help inform and shape that bill. And in New York, the session is still active through June, and there is a textile bill on the books there as well. It's unlikely to pass this year, but it will most likely be picked up again next year. And the New York state legislature has been actively engaging in stakeholder meetings to inform that bill as well. We are also seeing EPR is not the only piece of legislation or policy approach that can help move us towards a circular economy for textiles. We're also seeing other activity, both at the federal level and the state level, on bills addressing upstream supply chains and transparency and accountability, and also downstream, for example, the ban on disposing textiles in Massachusetts, which has led to a lot higher collection rates and a lot more activity there. So there's a whole host of different approaches, and they're coming together and addressing the system holistically, but it is still very much a patchwork of legislation. Go on to the next slide. So I see from the registration list that we have a lot of experts already on the call, so I'm not going to belabor this. But for those of you who are not as familiar, extended producer responsibility is a policy approach and a practice where producers take the responsibility for the management of their products at the end of the useful life. And that responsibility can be financial, it can be operational, it can be both. And in general, producers are defined as the brand owners, although the definition can vary from bill to bill. Next slide. We're seeing more EPR policy across lots of different product types, and packaging is also especially taking off, primarily because governments are striving towards waste reduction, zero waste, and higher diversion rates. And so we want to see that increase in diversion and recovery. Also, a reduced cost to government and taxpayers and ratepayers. Also, the goal of EPR, one of the goals is to incorporate the cost of the end of life or end of use management into the cost of the product from the beginning, and to improve the design of products to reduce the environmental impact across the product's lifespan. Go to the next slide. Textiles in particular has caught the attention of many because of the disproportionate impacts that it has across its lifespan, especially on the upstream side. There are a lot of social and environmental impacts of the supply chain. But on the downstream side of things, between 2000 and 2018, which is the latest year of data we have from the US EPA, textile waste grew at a pace that exceeded the growth of any other major category of waste in the US waste stream. Now, we don't have any more recent data since 2018 at a national level, but the production of textiles hasn't slowed down, especially with ultra fast fashion. And so we expect that this trend has somewhat continued in the growth of textile waste generation. And so that creates a problem, but also at the same time, it creates a huge opportunity for us to leverage those resources and valorize them. Go on to the next slide. EPR programs have a few common features. They're created by legislation, which establishes the rules and the targets. They are, sorry, I got boxed in my way. They're managed by one or more producer responsibility organizations, and that producer responsibility organization creates a program plan, and then the program is operated according to the approved program plan. So that's kind of a common underpinning of different EPR programs, are these three things: created by legislation, managed by and governed by rules and regs, managed by a PRO, and guided by a program plan. Globally, we are we're following in the footsteps of some of the leadership taking place in and throughout Europe. So the Zero Waste Framework Directive required source separated collection as of January 1st of this year throughout the EU. And in order to comply with that, individual jurisdictions in the EU and member states have turned towards extended producer responsibility to create those programs and comply with that mandate. We're also seeing some voluntary programs outside of the EU, such as in Colombia and Australia, and at least Australia's may become mandatory if they don't meet the performance expectations of the voluntary program. And of course, in the US, as I mentioned, California has enacted its law, and we're all very excited to see what the outcome of that is. However, a lot of these programs, except for France, are very new, and we don't have a lot of case studies or learnings to go on in terms of how it's being implemented. And so as we go down this path in the US, either in Washington, California, maybe New York, maybe some other states, it's going to be a learning process, and we're going to be sort of innovating and creating new opportunities, and we're going to have the ability to adapt as we go along. But it is interesting and encouraging to see the activity across the globe looking at EPR. There's even some talk in eastern parts of Africa around the concept of EPR. We can go on to the next slide. So I'm not going to read through all of these in the interest of time, but some of the main intended impacts that EPR could have on the circular textile landscape is to create a level playing field. Going back to that first slide of communicating my belief that policy is a critical lever. It's one of the reasons for that is because there's a competitive disadvantage for making any kind of change or investment in the status quo. And so creating that level playing field for brands allows us to unlock that investment and unlock that innovation and building of the infrastructure. Infrastructure development is another objective of EPR. So we're going to have the funds through the producer fees and through the EPR program in order to bolster the collection, sorting, reuse, repair, repurposing, recycling infrastructure that we need in order to responsibly manage our textiles. It de-risks investments. It creates economies of scale. As I always say, the textile circular economy is a volumes game in a lot of ways. So if we can increase the economy of scale, we'll all be better off. Of course, there's consumer education, and let's see what other one is important to highlight on here. Um, and yeah, legitimizing new reverse supply chains. So just making it a formalized process and a more transparent process. Go on to the next slide. Some of the federal activities that are happening, there's the Congressional Slow Fashion Caucus by Representative Pingree from Maine. And that is a caucus that has developed with three areas of focus. One is on reducing textile waste, one is on labor rights, and one is on environmental impact. And Congress commissioned the GAO, the Government Accountability Office, to study the textile circularity sector across the US last year, and the GAO published its first report at the end of December, which I highly recommend to anyone who's interested in it. They provide some recommendations on what federal agencies can do to work on this issue. They're currently continuing their research and working on another report, so hopefully we'll see another version or another rendition or part two of that come out in the next year or so. Go to the next slide. Also, looking at the international level, the G7, which is a consortium of different countries working to promote shared agendas on different topics, has identified textile circularity as an agenda item. And they want to work on the development of a common voluntary agenda on circular textiles and fashion. And I know that they had a meeting last week and they're actively working on this and they're engaging stakeholders from across the value chain. So if any of you are interested in what kind of cooperative activities are happening at the international level, I encourage you to check out what they're working on. Go to the next slide. And I think one of my final slides here is just touching on the great work that the National Institute of Standards and Technologies is doing. They hosted a series of workshops over the last few years, and they've really gathered a lot of experts to come together and brainstorm and talk about what kinds of standards. They're a non-regulatory federal agency, so what kinds of standards and guidelines and support could they potentially create or contribute to help support the framework of circular textile approaches in the US. And they recently published their first open source version of NIR spectroscopy data library. And two of the areas that I'm very excited and hopeful to work with them on is on commodity specifications for bales that are sorted in textile sorting facilities, just like we have at traditional MRFs where you have bale specifications for different commodities. I'm hoping that we develop something like that for textiles, and also a commodity price index. Again, same thing, we have these price indices for different commodities across traditional recycling. It'll really help standardize and open up trade and open up the ability to benchmark if we have that same type of price index for newly developed commodity bales specs. And I think I have one final slide on here. Oh, maybe I have two. Right, the HS code revision. So global trade is governed by HS codes. It's how we track what we're importing and exporting. And one of the ways that we are hoping to get more granular insights into the movement of used textiles across the globe is through HS code revisions and potentially making them a little bit more specific so we know the nature of the textiles that are being exported and imported, whether they're reusable or recyclable, things like that. So that's another set of activities that I'm very excited about. And all this, I'm not going to read this out to you, but all of this is just to say that, again, EPR is not the only tool in the toolbox. It can be combined and it should be combined with other approaches to help create the ideal system that we want and leverage different opportunities to reduce barriers or provide incentives. So there's a whole host of different types of regulations, and some are better implemented at the local level, some at the state level, some at the federal level. And these all work in concert. So thank you so much. And with that, I will hand it over back to the hosts.
Great. Thank you so much, Marissa. That was just a wealth of information. So I have a question for you. Given all that we've learned from all of these other countries that have implemented different either textile EPR policies or different policies that are working to advance that circular economy, what can we here in the US learn, and how does that differ by state level policy versus national policy?
Yeah, so it's a little early to know exactly what lessons we can learn from the implementation of EPR specifically across the globe. France has had a nice long journey with it so far and has had revisions along the way. I think we're going to have to pay very close attention to the regulatory development process because that's where a lot gets hashed out. But I do think that EPR is a really great state level tool. Even though there's the potential for different rules to be developed that don't necessarily align or harmonize with each other. If we are being strategic about those conversations and the development of the state level EPR regulations, then we can look to bring that consistency across states. And then I think other types of legislation is better at the federal level, such as anything governing trade, the HS codes, labeling of textiles, and things of that nature. But especially for the foreseeable future, I think we're going to make the most progress looking at state level if we're talking about extended producer responsibility.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Well, that is a great segue transition into our next speaker, Dr. Joanne Brasch, who will be speaking more directly about some state policy that recently passed here in California. So I will pass it over to Joanne.
Thank you, Kathryn. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. As mentioned, my name is Joanne Brasch. I am the Director of Advocacy for the California Product Stewardship Council. I do have a background in textiles, so I worked at UC Davis in the Department of Textiles. So I like to say I have alumni at a lot of the brands out there. But I've been with CPSC I'm going on my 8th year. And this is really exciting stuff because CPSC, if you want to go to the next slide, we've been around we're going also on 17 years, and CPSC has been around for basically once there were landfill bans. So mercury thermostats and batteries were banned from the landfill. And what that resulted in was local governments didn't know what to do. There was no oversight where they went. There was no tracking or reporting on the impact of those bans. And so they got together and created CPSC with ICR, our founding director on the call. Hi, Heidi. And basically said, we need industry at the table. We need holistic programs that are dynamic and have the oversight and the ability to adapt as the market changes. And so that's what CPSC has been doing is EPR since the beginning of our existence. But if you go to the next slide, we've really progressed over the last, 17 years. Waste has changed. Even in the 8 years I've been here, the waste priorities have changed. The way, things are regulated changed. So CPSCs have adapted our mission and kind of clarified that our vision is not just on products, but also on energy and just how our cities are and our state will set performance goals and oversee these programs. So they're not just recycling and hoping it works out, And so EPR is what we call a dynamic, market-based incentive program. So it'll bring in all sorts of other tools, if you go to that fabulous list that Marissa shared, there are different tools built in. And so we're really excited. CPSC's worked on medicine and needle EPR. We've worked on batteries. And, we're excited to talk today about textiles. But also know we're not done. We're still working on solar panels, and there's a future in this way we manage waste that it doesn't have to fall on the cities and counties to just figure it out as the materials show up. So if you go to the next slide, I'll really get into SB 707, but I'm not going to talk about the content of the bill. I think there's lots of webinars. This is probably, I've been on the speaking circuit since it passed, but Happy to send some references if you really want to deep dive. It's a complex bill. It's over 20 pages. And we spent over 5 years negotiating and kind of developing the bill. So even though it went through a 2-year legislative process, we were working on this bill years before it actually got introduced. So today I'm really going to talk about the process on how we got such a complex industry-funded bill passed, because if we can replicate that process and get the communities involved in Washington, Washington can pass a bill that really works for those communities. So I do want to start, with a big thank you to all the associations, the industry groups, the nonprofits, and CalRecycle and their technical assistance, because it took everyone's contributions and suggested amendments to get the bill to this final version that crossed the finish line. So thank you, Chelsea and AFA. Thank you, obviously, Heidi and our National Association spinoff. But also there were hundreds of association groups that you wouldn't expect to pop up because they're not always working actively on other state policies. So there are like Hygiene Product Association. There's the National Council of Textile Associations. There are 20 to 25 textile industry specific. There's laundry associations. There's uniform associations. So really what it took is time to educate each and every one of them of how a waste policy is important to them. And adjusting how you pitch the bill and how you frame it really depends on who you're talking to. Is it someone who's going to pay into the program, or is it someone who's going to benefit from being a processor or a contractor? So really, it took 5 years of a lot of hand-holding, a lot of answering the same questions, sometimes multiple times a day, sometimes answering the same question multiple times in a meeting. But what it takes to get everyone on the same page as we turn the page, everyone on the same page as we cross the finish line. So we were really proud to cross the finish line with 158 endorsements and 0 opposition on record. And that's at history in California, because there's been lots of EPRs that have been really supported, but this had 0 opposition on record. That meant the leading industry groups went neutral, the retailers, the Chamber of Commerce, some of the manufacturers associations. And it's because we spent so much time talking about some of the tiniest details that are maybe just 1 or 2 words in the final bill, but the discussion on how to really find the pathway that's best for everyone, with keeping our communities and the population who live in California and are impacted by the decisions we make globally, really keeping that in mind. So it is the first in the nation, textile EPR, but being the first means we don't want to be the best. We want the next state to raise the bar. We want all future textile EPRs to really build on what we've accomplished. And so I've love working with Washington and New York and really just communicating what we didn't get in 707 that would really raise the bar and push the industry to the circularity and the performance standards that we're trying to achieve. Some of the things I'm most proud about for SB 707, and again, I'm not going to go into content. I only have 15 minutes. I've probably talked already 10 into it, but the definition of repair and the mandatory sorting and processing of repairable items. Super proud about that. The mandatory producer funding for microfiber filtration for all the participating laundries. Global precedent for that. Very proud about that. And in general, the human health impacts that are sprinkled throughout the bill. If you control F, human health or public health, we're really proud that in every section of the bill, where we could, whether it was around chemical management, whether it's around, green design strategies, always connecting it to the public health. And to say that it's, we don't know what's going to happen. There are areas of uncertainty. So it would be amiss if I didn't say, there's a lot of misinformation going around about chemical recycling right now. Happy to talk about that. There's lots of recordings of me addressing that. There's only going to be one PRO, program operator, and we don't know who that is yet. And there's no take back mandate. Brands don't have to take back their items. They have to pay into a program. And if they have a take back, they get cost reduction, but there's no mandate to take it back. So where we are in the process, if you go to the next slide, is really we are in the first step of implementation. And staying involved in this bill and staying involved in the regulatory process is going to help Washington and future states understand where we're running into challenges, because we can address those with future legislation. So in July 17th, CalRecycle will be hosting their first workshop as authorized by SB 707. It's a hybrid workshop, so you can attend in person or remotely. We want to encourage everyone as much as possible to come in person. CPSC is hosting a lunch and a discussion afterwards, and we open it to everyone who can come. We want to fill the auditorium and show that textiles was a good decision and a really important priority to not only diversion, but setting the stage for circularity that brings jobs and human health protection into the forefront. So in the meantime, while we're waiting for the long regulatory process, the long needs assessment, there's 3 things I want to leave everyone to work on. It's time for us to prepare our data, prepare our advocacies, prepare our requests and what we want CalRecycle or future legislation to include. We want to encourage continuing our pilot projects, continuing to build that capacity and to work, especially with the domestic opportunities. I see Alyssa from Looped Works literally just joined, and a great example of recycling capacity on the West Coast that we want to build up before this program becomes fully implemented. And the partnerships, right? EPR is about working together and having a platform where we can protect, trade secrets, but also elaborate on opportunities and expand on, everything that's in the bill. So what I really want today is to focus on Washington. The SB 707 has already passed. Nothing's going to happen quickly. All eyes on Washington. And how can we really help Senator or Assemblymember Reeves' bill get the best language that's for the community and for Washington across the finish line? So I'm happy to take questions. There's opportunities. Our textile task force, we're really proud that it's no cost. That's our opportunity to discuss and get involved in SB 707. It's virtual, no homework, but we really want to make sure that people know this is an equitable and accessible process. You don't need a pay to play. So we welcome you and we encourage everyone to stay involved. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Joanne. That was fantastic. And we're just so appreciative for all of your hard work in passing SB 707. You briefly touched on this, but I'd love to hear more about how SB 707 defines and prioritizes textile reuse and repair specifically, and how that might be setting a global precedent.
Yeah, we could probably chew an hour just on that, but I'll just focus on the definition of repair, because not only does it include mending and kind of adding physical modifications to the product, it also includes ironing, washing, and the process of preparing an item for resale, which is time and it takes, labor. So with that definition, it adds a lot of opportunity on what includes in the budget and funding. But then within the bill itself, we prioritize repair and reuse in the needs assessment, in the plan, in the budget, and then you have to even call it out for the grants. Because if you just say the waste hierarchy is important, it's not enough, and we've seen that in the existing bills. So we took the waste hierarchy and said, your budget has to show the waste hierarchy. Your grants process has to show the waste hierarchy. So actually applying the waste hierarchy with enforceable measures is how we got repair, not just in definition and in the program, prioritized in several different components.
That's great. Thank you so much. And I hope that we can follow in your footsteps here in Washington. So with that, I will now pass it over to Representatives Kristine Reeves, who will be able to give us some more insight on the bill that she recently introduced this past legislative session, HB 1420.
Well, thanks so much, Kathryn and T, for hosting me today. Welcome to everyone on this call. For some folks who may not know me, my name is Kristine Reeves. My pronouns are she, her, ea. I identify as Afro-Latina. Today, I am presenting, for those who may be visually impaired, brown skin, black rimmed glasses, long black hair, emerald green sweater. And happy to be joining you all today to talk a little bit, very briefly, about the Washington version of California's bill. So what I'll share in the agenda today is just kind of a what, so what, now what? What is the problem Washington is trying to solve? So what? Why does solving this problem matter? And the now what? What can we do together to advance towards solving this problem? So I'll ask folks on the tech side if you could advance the slide for me, please. Thank you. I just have this one slide. So as I'm talking, feel free to read through it. But what I'd like to just share first and foremost is my purpose for introducing this legislation is that I'm a mom, first and foremost, of two young kids. I have a 10-year-old and a 12-year-old. I also identify as a female, and I'm a woman of color. So I, in all of the stereotypical ways, am ensconced in interactions around the textile market. My kids are growing out of their clothes faster than I can keep up with them. What do you do with them when they are finished with those clothes and can no longer wear them? I also, as a mom on a budget, I'm trying to figure out how to get high quality clothing for my kids as they romp through the world. Recognizing that production matters in how durable clothing is going to be for our small family long term and what that means to my budget at home. So a lot of the work that I do is really centered on my lived experience as a mom, as a woman of color, and as somebody who grew up in poverty. I grew up in and out of foster care. I was homeless at certain points in my experience. So that really informs my motivation for bringing this legislation forward. I also serve on the Consumer Protection and Business Committee in the legislature, as well as the Ag and Natural Resources Committee. So when I think about this scope of work, I'm thinking about it from a balanced approach between consumer protection and business implementation. So that's a little bit about why I'm doing this. Why does it matter to the state of Washington? Because like California, like Oregon, the West Coast, I believe, is the best coast in working towards environmental protections and environmental justice that advances a shared goal towards livability and sustainability. So I want to talk a little bit about key provisions in the bill, if you'll allow me. There's about 7 big components to this bill. We go over a lot of scope and definitions in the bill, talking about covered products, what the producers are, what a producer responsibility organization is. That's really important because if folks can't see themselves reflected in this bill and know that this bill applies to them, it's going to be a challenge to make sure that everybody's at the table. And we want them to be clear about what the work that we're going to engage in this legislation really is. We then have a massive section on the program structure, as Joanne shared, really laying out registration and compliance, the needs assessment components, collection infrastructure, things of that nature. And for me, it's really, really important. I'm an organizational psychologist by training. It's really important to me that we think about the structures, not only of the systems that we currently exist in. As a woman of color, I often say I'm operating in an institution not built for me, by me, or with my inclusion in mind. I want to make sure as a lawmaker that I'm not perpetrating the harms that have been inherently built into those structures. And as we build new structures, making sure that we're doing so with as much equity, inclusion, diversity, environmental justice as possible. So that leads to the third section, which is around environmental and social standards. Obviously, we're focused on things like emphasizing repair, reuse, responsible recycling, making sure that producers are investing in that local infrastructure. For many of you, I'm not sure if you're familiar with this, but we're very focused on PFAS reductions here in Washington with large military installations. We have a lot of chemicals that are harmful, and I'm not blaming the military, just acknowledging that because they use many of these chemicals, we found a higher concentration of them here in Washington. The 4 sections on eco-modulated fees. We then go over section 5, which is education and outreach. Again, because I take a consumer protection approach to all of my legislation, it's really important to me that anytime we are changing laws or creating new laws, that we really engage in the important work of doing education and outreach relative to the work that we're trying to do. And that we do it again, with equity and inclusion in mind, making sure that it's multilingual. In my district alone, I represent the 5th most diverse school district in the country. Over 126 languages are spoken in our schools. I want to make sure that every single constituent in my district, but across the state, is aware of this work, is aware of the program, and how they can engage in it. The 6th section is over disclosure requirements. This will get adjusted through the Department of Ecology as we reform the bill next year for its reintroduction. But it's really focused on how producers must disclose, what they must disclose to the department. And then the last section's on oversight and enforcement. And again, this is really important to me as somebody who thinks about these things in systems. We can have the best intent possible in the world when we draft legislation, and a lot of us as legislators come to do that. As Stacey Abrams says, we're coming with a solution in search of a problem. For me, it's really important that if we want to change both individual, community, or systems and societal behavior, we've got to have excuse my language, with the carrots and the sticks in that enforcement process to be able to move that agenda forward. So those are the key components and the provisions of the bill. So what? Why does it matter? Well, I fundamentally believe that if we can do some of this structural change to how people engage in the market around acquiring their textile products, not just clothing, but curtains and bedding and all of these things that we buy to enhance our quality of life, that if we can change that social behavior, we're going to do it through public policy, and we're going to do it in a way that's equitable and inclusive. And why does that matter? Because when we change that behavior and we do it with the mindset of environmental justice in mind, I think we're going to get better quality of life, better quality of products, a better quality of life in our community, and ultimately a better quality of living for our environment and its protection. So with that, I'll end by saying the now what? What's the thing that every person on this call could do in the next 5 minutes, in the next 5 days, in the next 5 weeks to support this work? Well, in the next 5 minutes, I'll put this in the chat, but you can take down my contact information. I am inviting every single person on this call who considers themselves a key informant, or for lack of a better word, a stakeholder in this process and wants to participate in this dialogue in Washington. I'd invite you to email me personally. We are keeping an Excel spreadsheet. I know, very novel in the age of government technology, but we're tracking all of the folks who would like to participate in this dialogue. And we're connecting with you. If we have questions, if you have input, insights, things that you can contribute to the dialogue and you want to be included in those key informant conversations, email me today. If you are somebody who just wants to keep track of what's going on, this is a little bit more low risk, low lift. There's a link on this slide and I can put it in the chat as well. Sign up just to get updates from the ledge.wa.gov email list about this bill. So as we go into the January session, you can track what the progress of the bill is, when it's up for a hearing, whether or not it's made it out of committee. And you can participate either in testifying on the bill, engaging with leaders in our legislature on what you'd like to see happen with the bill, how you'd like to see it changed. You don't have to talk to me directly. You can talk to other legislators and leaders in the building as well. So those are my what, so what, now what about the work that we are doing here in Washington. Again, I want to thank our organizers for hosting us today, for including us in the dialogue, and we look forward to hopefully being good partners with all of you as we continue to advance towards the tipping point to ensure that textile EPR just becomes the law of the land. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Representative Reeves. That was a wonderful overview, and we're really grateful to you for taking that stance and bringing this issue forward here in Washington and hoping to replicate California. I'm wondering what you perceive will be the biggest challenges in working to get this bill passed successfully in Washington, whether that's at the legislative level or the logistic level and infrastructure.
Yeah, thanks for that question, Kathryn. And I've talked to a couple of folks about this, but Washington just successfully passed our plastics EPR bill this last session. This is a bill that folks, Representative Berry and others, have been working on for nearly 6 years. And I would argue that the challenge that we really surfaced as to why that bill wasn't successfully moving was really around the lack of equity and inclusion and the lack of environmental justice that was centered in the process relative to the EPR implementation. And so I also chair the Legislative Black Caucus in Olympia. It's now the largest Black caucus in the Western United States. We have 14 members. And what we really found was this disconnect and ultimately a stigma around how kind of dominant culture, environmental activists have come into our legislature, and are advancing the discussion around environmental protection without acknowledging or recognizing, for example, in the textile space, that if you are Black, brown, or low income in our state, you've been doing the circular economy for generations. I don't know about you, but I grew up in poverty. I recycle my butter containers as Tupperware. I shopped at Goodwill and Value Village. And when I did it in poverty, I was trashy, I was poor. Now, when you go to downtown Seattle and you're seeing people pop up vintage shops and other things, it's now classy. It's the environmentally sustainable thing to do. The biggest challenge we are going to have in implementing this policy and getting it through the process is helping do the really hard work. And I would argue the anti-racist work, the anti-capitalist work of ensuring that we destigmatize this, that we acknowledge it for what it's been, that we thank communities, particularly low-income Black and brown communities who've been doing this work for generations, for their leadership and their modeling, and that we then partner with them to ensure that we advance this policy in an equitable way. And that's actually what we did to get plastics EPR done. It's the same strategy that I intend to use to hopefully get textiles EPR done in Washington as well. But I do think that's going to be the biggest challenge is how do we acknowledge the historic harms and stigmas that come with this work while advancing the new terms around circularity and sustainability in this space.
Definitely. Thank you for that point. We're really grateful that you are the one bringing this forward because we know that you'll pay so much care and attention to that point. And as my co-host T said, all environmental work should be environmental justice work. So we really appreciate that perspective.
Thanks, team.
All right. And now, finally, I will introduce McKenna Morrigan, who works at Seattle Public Utilities. And she is going to give us some more insight on how something like textile EPR policy, like this House Bill 1420, would actually impact us from a more local government perspective.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Kathryn. Thanks to the co-design team for putting this series together. It's been super interesting and informative, and I really appreciate the chance to be here with you all today. I don't have slides. I just want to give a little context. We sort of started globally, with all of the things happening on textile policy and moving down to the more local level. So I am policy and strategy advisor at Seattle Public Utilities. We are the part of city government here in Seattle that manages garbage, recycling, composting, but in recent years, we've really moved to center and highlight how important it is to look upstream to product design and production if we really want to advance our vision of zero waste and a more circular and inclusive economy. And so we have been seeking out ways to activate that approach at the local level, but also by engaging in state policy development and advocacy, because we know that the progress that we want to see and that we need in order to move forward to a more just and environmentally sustainable world is work that we cannot do on our own as a city. So just to give a little context specifically for how we've been thinking about textiles, the city of Seattle, based on our latest round of data, we believe that knowledge is power, and having a lot of data about what's in the waste stream really helps guide us as a city to prioritize and focus. And so based on our most recent round of data around what's being disposed of here in the city, we know that every year about 24 million pounds of textiles are sent to landfill through Seattle's solid waste system. And that is a tremendous amount. It's about 4% of our total disposal, which is really significant. And it's less than 10% of what is being disposed of statewide here in Washington. So it's a really significant problem. It's a growing problem. Those numbers are higher every time we look than they were in the last round of evaluation. And so we know that this is a really significant problem. And it's not just a significant problem because of the quantity of material and the cost that brings for our system, but because we know that the textiles that are being discarded embody carbon, embody precious resources, and embody labor and perhaps exploitation, of all along the supply chain, both of people and of our planet. And so we, about 10 years ago, started looking at what we could do in the city to address this issue. And we realized we've got some really robust and creative and exciting reuse, salvage, donation, repurpose activities here in the city. Very small scale independent shops all the way up to, one of the largest and most active Goodwill enterprises and other thrift and secondhand organizations that are actively working and doing really valuable sort of infrastructure work to help keep textiles in circulation here in our community. But when we looked at what was in the waste stream, what was being disposed, we recognized that there was a lot of stuff that was still really usable, whether for reuse and rewear, or even if not rewearable, with yarn or other materials that could be repurposed into wiping rags or recycled into other products. And so we started to pursue a communications campaign that would really communicate to residents it was okay to donate things even that weren't in great condition, because we learned from some market research locally that was a big concern that people had. Often the reason they didn't donate things was because they weren't sure that they were in good enough condition to be worthy of donating. So we did some market research and worked with the communications campaign to develop some materials to really help bring that message to folks that, hey, it's okay if it's, you know, a single sock instead of a pair, or a shirt with a stain. If you know, if it's clothing, if it's apparel, it's worth donating. You can keep that material in circulation. And we rolled that out. We made some really encouraging progress in sort of connecting with folks on that message. But as we moved forward in that process, what we recognized was that there were still some really significant and concerning gaps when it came to the end markets of those materials. And the market disruption on the recycling side for plastics recycling, unveiling sort of the harms and waste colonialism of the sort of curbside recycling plastics and paper industry was coming to light. And we were recognizing that the same issue was happening with textiles. There are lots of really wonderful, exciting, and you know, sort of socially positive, people-centered, and there is a lack of transparency and accountability for the flow of materials through the secondhand market. And that gave us pause as a city, and we were in partnership with King County, recognizing that if we didn't have the kind of safeguards and policy frameworks, and what Representative Reeves just discussed about risked, you know, by focusing only on one part of the solution and not the holistic solution, that we risk actually creating more harm than help. And so that was, you know, one example, one moment of our journey that really has driven us toward the recognition that we need a holistic policy solution for this textiles issue. Because if we absolutely need to engage our customers, our residents and businesses in, in collection, because we know that there's a lot of good stuff that's going to waste, but we also need to have assurance that material that's collected is being, directed to its highest and best use, prioritizing that waste hierarchy that Joanne was talking about. And then for materials that are being sent globally in particular, we need to have, absolute confidence that there is transparency, oversight, and safeguards that protect that material and those systems from doing harm globally in communities that are often the most marginalized and exploited, and risk being the victims of waste colonialism. So that is one of the things we're most excited about with a producer responsibility framework, bringing in that transparency and accountability. And we've been really proud to be in support of Representative Reeves' bill, HB 1420 this year, and really looking forward to working on it with all of you moving forward. So I think with that, I'll just say, yeah, we know we need a policy solution. We, as the local government, cannot solve this problem ourselves, and no one of us can solve this problem. We cannot solve one aspect of this problem. It has to be a comprehensive solution that looks at the entire life cycle and supply chain. And I'm so excited about California's law moving forward, and really looking forward to working with others on this meeting to advance the legislation in Washington next session.
Wonderful. Thank you, McKenna. I really appreciate your perspective of tying in that local impact to the more global impact and what our actions here just in Seattle can really have implications on our global society. And we just need to take that into consideration. My question for you is how will a textile EPR bill and policy impact Seattle residents and businesses from that really on the ground local perspective?
You know, we are fortunate, like I said before, in that we already have like a pretty vibrant, um, resale and secondhand uh, operation and ecosystem here in the city. But it's still not as convenient for folks to donate and put their textiles into that system as it should be. And so that's one of the things, I've worked on a development of other producer responsibility policies. And that is the thing from a local government that I really bring forward as a top priority, is making sure that our residents have convenient and equitable access. So that means paying attention to opportunities for folks who rely on public transit or bike or walk. They need to have a convenient way to participate in these programs as well. So I think having funding and retailer support to build out collection infrastructure. Like I said, we can't just collect. We have to have confidence that that collection network is going to tie into a responsible management, ecosystem. But you can't do anything with no material. So you have to have a collection network. And that is where, as the city, that's the bread and butter of a lot of what we do when it comes to materials management. And so I think it'll help us, unlock the resources and partnerships that we need to be able to build out the kind of infrastructure that can actually engage our residents in an equitable and exciting way across the city to, to get textiles back in circulation when an individual is done with them.
Great. Thank you so much. So now we have a little bit of time for some general questions from the audience for all of our panelists. So I'd love to have them come back up, so to say, virtually. And then my co-host T will help me with the questions. Hopefully we can spotlight everyone as well.
Yeah, awesome. So we had quite a few really interesting questions answered already in the chat, so I'd encourage people to go ahead and look at those. But Deb is asking, what do you think is the most surprising or interesting impact of EPR legislation for consumers? So did somebody want to take that?
Do it. It's the education for the consumers. That's the most public facing part of the EPR programs. A lot of us don't even realize we're participating in EPR unless you know what's happening back at the house. And I think so often everyone's like, we want more consumer education, but don't realize how expensive it is and how to, if you want consistency in messaging. And so I think that one of the biggest benefits, other than convenient and free access to the program, is the education.
Yes, education is so important. Thank you for highlighting that. From Kathryn, we have a question. We have found in Minnesota that our secondhand markets are reluctant to take worn, torn, stained garments, etc. How did we get around that? Or how did you get around that?
Yeah, I can probably try and jump in on this one. The acceptance criteria of different collectors varies from collector to collector, just like kind of like, what you can recycle from jurisdiction to jurisdiction varies, except there's more diversity within a single location because you have different operators. And some of them really prioritize the reusable Others that are larger and have more sophisticated back-end systems, like a Goodwill, for example, will take the non-rewearable materials. It really just depends. However, we are working on the downstream solutions for recycling and repurposing and reclaimed wiping cloth. A lot of the materials that are collected right now, mm, only about 5% end up going to waste, and the rest of it has a home. So even if it's torn or stained, it can still go into shoddy and mechanical recycling, or it can go into reclaimed wiping cloth. And so that those industries are vibrant and they exist. And so there are homes for that. So it really just depends on the pathway that you use for it to get funneled into that system.
And we had a lot of the thrift stores at the table with SB 707, and that's what we're trying to solve with a lot of the language around collection sites. So they get funded not only to be a collection site, but they get funded to pull out the things that are just not sellable. Because right now they don't want it because you have to pull it out, then you have to find a market for it, and it's just probably going to the landfill. So SB 707 was designed to use the thrifts and through an opt-in system. If they want to be a collection site to receive the ripped, torn, stained, then they will get extra support to be that site.
Yeah, it's costly to manage that at this point in time. And so if we want to increase the capture rate of the non-rewearable fraction, systems like extended producer responsibility programs can really help do that. And actually, I posted an answer to Chelsea's question in the thread, and one of the things they are seeing in Massachusetts are with the increased tonnages of textiles they're collecting as a result of the disposal ban is a higher percentage of the non-rewearable textiles and the scraps that are not necessarily suitable for resale as a garment.
Yeah, and Kathryn, did you want to jump in on that one as well?
I don't have anything to add specifically. We do have some other questions if there aren't any more from the audience.
Yeah, I think we had a comment about PPE, but yeah, let's go ahead to some other questions. And also, I'd encourage people just look at the answers that people that our panelists did via text, since there are some really great questions there.
Yeah, on a similar line, how can policymakers strike that balance between ambitious recycling targets and the current limitations that we have of textile recycling technologies, especially at that state by state level?
I'm sure you all have answers to this. My answer would be use a ramp up period and feedback systems through the process of implementing any kind of program and in developing the regs. Allow for the evolution of a program that works hand in hand with the realities on the ground of the system to be able to develop in time to meet those requirements.
I would kind of hand it to Representative Reeves and the way she presented, putting people first, community first, and designing the program around the users of the products and the users of the program. I mean, that's really an amazing. So I'll just thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Joanne. Yeah, I mean, I think it's critically important when we think about the structures that both currently exist, but the ways in which we want to transform those structures. And again, this is just for me basic organizational psychology, change management. It's really about bringing the people that are most impacted, Black, brown, low income, or otherwise, along in the process. That is how you mitigate kind of change risk, right? Of rejection of that change. And so for me, I know it's more costly, and it is often the thing that gets sacrificed in public policy making first, as Joanne kind of highlighted, as Marissa highlighted, that community engagement, that outreach. When it gets really expensive, people are like, we're just going to cut that to get to the crux of the structure that we want to build. But I really challenge folks to recognize that the investment on the front end in this structural development and putting people first, community first, and then the system is really going to be the thing that ensures, to Marissa's point, when you get that feedback loop process going, I think you'll find that that resistance to change is mitigated and minimized throughout the process because you've done that investment on the front end and you've really heard from folks about what it means to them to see this change happen in their communities.
I fully agree. And I'll add on another thing to that. And that's the needs assessment, right? When you're talking about EPR in particular, the needs assessment, especially that initial needs assessment, will tell us so much about what the gaps are, what does not exist, what does exist, what's working well, what maybe could be improved upon, where the frictions in the system are. And so I think that needs assessment will be really informative in making sure that the ideal pathways and systems that we want to see implemented can be achieved and how
Can
to
I
achieve.
just add one more thing onto that? Having been involved in development and then implementation and observing EPR programs for other product categories in the past in Washington and in other states, this has come up time and again when you are particularly or early in line in terms of implementing policy for a new product category. The industry is really afraid of what they're being asked to do because they haven't done it before, and they are really nervous about targets. And that's understandable, because if you don't know if you're going to be able to achieve something and you're being held to it in statute, like, that's really scary. But unfortunately, what that has meant in some of the past EPR programs is that no targets were set, because there was so much industry pushback on targets that was like, well, we don't know if we can achieve this, or there's too much uncertainty. And what we've seen in terms of outcomes from those programs without targets is that they don't perform. They don't do what we need them to do. And you can't hold the companies accountable for doing better because they weren't asked to do anything specifically from an outcomes standpoint. And so I think it's really critically important that we have targets, or that we at least have a process for setting targets. And it doesn't have to be in statute. That's like the scariest thing for companies, is like targets in statute. So it doesn't have to be that, but there need to be targets set that companies are ultimately held accountable for. And that process can be fair and it can have a runway and all of that. But absolutely, I think my learning from, hard knocks in the EPR space is that just because there's uncertainty and just because it's going to take a long time to build the infrastructure and figure it out, doesn't mean we don't, put a stake in the ground somewhere and say, we're gonna hold you to real outcomes, at some point here in the future, and let's work together to figure out what those are, so that everybody feels comfortable that it's going to be doable by the time we get there.
And with textiles in particular, sorry, Tia, you're
Go
about to say.
ahead. We'll just, yeah, go ahead.
With textiles in particular, it's unique because we don't know a lot about, the system and how much we're collecting and where it's all going right now, to the degree that we all want to know about it. To the same degree that we know about our curbside recycling, which, has been in the municipal realm for a couple decades, and we have lots of very, very detailed data on. And so this is going to be a learning journey for all of us, frankly.
Yeah, and we were gonna ask, we have a couple more questions in the chat, so I'd encourage for the panelists to respond to those in the chat if possible. I'm sorry we can't get to any more, but we are gonna do a little, maybe 3-minute bio break. So we'll come back at 11:26. Thank you all so much. Sorry for the shorter break, but we had such an awesome conversation. And if the panelists can respond to those great questions in the chat. Thank you all. We'll see you in a few minutes.
All right. We are coming back from our short bio break, just so we can keep moving along and talk to more incredible people.
We're just going to take 10 to 15 minutes to introduce some of the people and organizations that are already doing crucial work on the ground and in our communities. These individuals and entities can not only serve as models for future development, but also for resources for us in the present. So first, we're going to have some perspectives from academia, which will be part of our policy data and research breakout session. So our first speaker is Jaleesa Marshall. Yeah, take it away.
Hi, thank you, Timothy and everyone. As Timothy mentioned, my name is Jaleesa Marshall. I use she, her pronouns, and I reside on the ancestral lands of the Duwamish. So I've worked in the fashion industry locally for nearly 20 years, and most of that time has been spent as a product developer. For those of you who aren't familiar with that term, that means essentially that I specialize in taking designs from concept to market. And through my experiences, I've been allowed to collaborate with and occasionally visit activists, agents, buyers, factories, designers, mills, policymakers, and specialists all over the world, as you can see reflected in this collage. And these experiences have given me so many rich insights. So I'm currently pursuing a PhD in sustainability education because something that I noticed is that fashion tends to focus its efforts primarily on the environment and not the cultural and socio-ecological impacts of how we design, develop, and produce what we wear. So that's really what I'm interested in bringing into the conversation in sustainability. And my research aims to examine sustainability in fashion holistically through the lens of cultural appropriation and preservation to work towards equity across the supply chain.
Thank you so much, Jaleesa. Jaleesa will be again, in the policy data research and academia breakout room. So next, I'll be representing 5 voices from the Seattle World School, which is a local high school serving refugees and immigrants from approximately 40 countries around the world. We asked students a few questions about their perspectives on the accessibility and desirability of secondhand clothing, to better understand future markets and how young people today are impacted by a rapidly changing fashion system. So first we asked, how do you feel about secondhand clothing? And most of the students like secondhand clothes because they can find items that they love at affordable prices. Some students were even surprised by the quality of items that they were able to find. However, some of the students prefer to buy new clothes, particularly because the cultural stigmas they still hold from the countries that they immigrated from. These cultural stigmas are often related to socioeconomics, spiritual beliefs, and sometimes even hygiene. So Tamiris from Kazakhstan said, personally, I don't feel good about secondhand clothing because in my country, it was bad to wear clothes from someone who is not a family member. I feel good about my friends who are thrifting, but for myself, no. Next, we asked, is secondhand clothing affordable? They answered yes, that secondhand clothing is still affordable, or that secondhand clothes are at least relatively affordable when compared to new clothes. So although we are seeing an increase in retail prices generally in secondhand markets, it seems like local students are still able to access affordable secondhand clothing. Lam from Vietnam said secondhand clothing is affordable. I can find high quality brand name items for a fraction of their original retail price. And lastly, we asked, besides price, do you have any issues with accessing clothes that you love? Some issues mentioned include cost, sizing, and items being discontinued, but most of the students were able to address these issues or circumvent them by buying online. So Kevin from Guatemala said, the cost is usually the biggest problem, so I buy most of my clothes from the internet. So next up, we're going to talk to some community members from the swap, reuse, repair, and upcycling sector, which will be our second breakout room. So first, I'd like to introduce Amanda Miller, Executive Director of South King Tool Library. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thanks, everyone here. Some wonderful faces. My name is Amanda Miller. I use she, her pronouns. And the South King Tool Libraries are a great community resource. On May 10th, we were able to hold our 10th clothing swap in Federal Way, a great area that is extremely diverse socioeconomically and culturally. And I'm proud to say that we have diverted over 30,000 pounds of clothing since we began these endeavors. Shout out to Zakia from the Chaya movement for the original and best formatting we can have. So I know that it seems like there's a small drop in the bucket, hence my little bucket over there. In the vast sea of textile waste. I just really, truly believe that places like many different tool libraries and organizations are the buckets and the change efforts in our cultural and habit forming processes. So we also support upcycling, repair, and textile innovation as a tool library by lending things like clothing racks, sewing machines, and encouraging borrowing instead of buying through all of our programs. And the empowering that we can bring to our community helps proliferate these small actions that ripple out and create larger waves. Changing our cultural and habits and the community for the better is a small, judicious work and one that we can't discount, as you all have highlighted in the process. So thank you for including programs like these and many more in the effort. And everyone has a great part to play in reducing this waste. I know that together we're going to make a huge difference. So thank you again. I'm just gracious for all of you and all the work that we do.
Thank you so much, Amanda. I really appreciate that and the work that you do. Is Tally here? Are you signed on as Ming Ming, or otherwise Ming Ming if you wanted to come on to talk about Refugee Artisan Initiative?
Yes, this is Tally, and I am representing Ming Ming.
Awesome. Yeah, so Tally is the Director of Programs and Business Development at Refugee Artisan Initiative. So go ahead and take it away.
Great. So Refugee Artisan Initiative is a workforce development program that has focused on getting, we're in production space, getting things out of the landfill and upcycling them into products that can be sold. And our bottom line is providing training and work for refugee and immigrant women. So anything that is sold, all revenue goes back into that mission. We currently have 40 artisans, 35 are contract and work from home, and 5 are on staff. And we've been growing in response to the need. We have over 200 women on our waiting list. The reason why our model is works and is relatively popular is because we provide work for women to do from home, which allows them to overcome barriers related to childcare, transportation, etc. Some of the innovative ways that we've approached providing this work has been to focus on innovative ways to keep things out of landfill. So our latest grant, and this slide is representative of this, is through the Symbiosis grant through Department of Commerce. And we have been working with upcycling billboards, which have been thrown in the landfill typically, or shipped out of state for other companies to upcycle and sell. So by bringing the vinyl here, we're saving on the cost and carbon footprint of sending them out of state. And we're providing local jobs, and we're creating items that this bag is something that municipalities often purchase to hand out to encourage recycling in multifamily homes. So we've started with the city of Kirkland and the city of Auburn have each ordered between 1,500 and 2,000 bags each to be handing out to local community. Our hope is to leverage a preferred vendor status so that we can provide a more efficient way for these municipalities to provide these bags locally, and so that they don't each have to source them independently. This would be more effective in terms of keeping things out of landfill and more vinyl out of landfill, in the sense that we would save on efficiencies of costs for coordinating these contracts, and we would also be benefiting the local community socioeconomically by providing work for refugee and immigrant women.
Yes, thank you
So,
thank you so much, Kelly. I'm sorry, we're gonna just continue to move along, but if anybody's
yep,
interested, you
thank
can
you.
join the that breakout room. But we really do appreciate your holistic approach. And finally, we'll be hearing from Janelle Abbott, a zero waste upcycler and the founder of JRAT and Wardrobe Therapy. And just a reminder, 1 minute, please.
Hi, thank you. My name is Janelle Abbott. I'm the artist and designer behind JRAT Zero Waste. I make one-of-a-kind clothing from reclaimed materials, often sourced from free boxes, friends, followers, and occasionally the thrift store. My work fuses fashion with fine art, and I also dabble in performance art as a means of advocacy for garment workers' rights. My practice is zero waste, both in my pattern drafting methodology and my approach to upcycling. I use 100% of the material that I source. And single-handedly, I've divested an estimated 4,000 pounds of textiles from the landfill by creating over 2,000 garments since 2020. Additionally, I run a project called Wardrobe Therapy, where I work with private clients one-on-one to reconfigure clothing from their own wardrobes into new pieces that they can wear once again. And ultimately, my work is centered on advocating for people to wear and own more secondhand clothing, honor the labor of garment workers, and act as a firefighter against fast fashion.
Janelle is so amazing. I mean, everyone here is so amazing. Thank you for that, Janelle. And next, we'll be talking about workforce development and business solutions. So if you're interested in connecting with these speakers, then please join that breakout room. First, we'll hear from Sydney Porter, Coordinator for Sustainability and Circular Economy at Seattle Good Business Network.
Hello, everybody. My name is Sydney Porter, and Northwest Zone is a program of Seattle Good Business Network, and we are working to build out a community of businesses, organizations, and individuals who are all committed to building this thriving, regenerative zone and textiles economy across the Pacific Northwest. So, everybody within this group here is somebody who I'd love to see get involved if you aren't already. The QR code on here is just something that takes you to the join page. So if you want to go ahead and scan that and be able to look more at our membership, please feel free to do that. There's just like a one-time $50 fee to become a member. And basically what we're doing is we're working to advance a circular, collaborative, and transparent textiles economy across the Pacific Northwest. And we're doing that by building out a hub of information and community opportunities from our Circular Textile Speaker Series, where we've heard from folks like Rebecca Burgess from Fibershed, and we've had Circular Philadelphia with Samantha Witchen, and we're going to continue to bring in wonderful speakers. I might be reaching out to some of you guys because we want to uplift the work that's happening across this broader movement. So from that series to our industry database that's searchable by different functions. So if you're looking for somebody who, can it can do pattern making, or you're looking for a local dye house, make that more accessible information. And we also have our members communication platform. So our members are able to share opportunities or questions with each other and make those types of connections. And so all of this work is really about uplifting the diverse regional efforts that are happening across this movement. And I think it's put best by our member Nazia from Transcend. She gave a recent testimony that I think was just really beautiful, so I'd love to share that. She said, as somebody passionate about building a local, sustainable fashion supply chain here in the greater Seattle area, I was looking for resources, connections, and leads, and Northwest Zone delivered all of that and more. After posting on their platform, I immediately received responses, offering introductions and leads on sourcing local textile waste. It was a tremendous resource for someone like me who's navigating the challenges of manufacturing locally. Northwest Zone is truly a vital space for anyone working to strengthen the regional supply zone trades economy and build a more collaborative, sustainable future in the Pacific Northwest. And so I'd really love to just use this time to invite you all to join in on that community. If you have events going on, you can post them on our community calendar and I'll share them out, and we can continue to collaborate. And I wanna uplift what you guys are doing. So yeah, come join.
Thank you so much, Sydney. We really appreciate the work that you're doing. Next up is Zakia. 1 minute, because we're going to try and get as many minutes as we can within our breakout sessions. So, Zakia?
Can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah.
Perfect. Hello, everybody. I'm Zakia Sita, the founder and executive director of the Chaya Movement. We are a nonprofit based here in Washington State. Our mission is to empower the next generation of ethical fashion leaders while tackling environmental impact of textile waste. So we do currently host an advocate and training program. So I put a lot of things on the slide just so you can get an overview. So I know, because I know I can't touch on everything. But we do have an advocate and training program that works primarily with young adults ages 16 to 24, focusing and prioritizing those from historically marginalized backgrounds. We put them through a paid internship program. We offer workforce training, community engagement. Our advocate and training program does allow those folks to be able to partner and work alongside a local sustainable fashion company and giving them real world experience and tools to lead in this space. We also host free community events like our clothing swaps, which is our signature event. Thanks, Amanda, for shouting that out. We started those back in 2018, started and partnered with the Tool Library in 2020. We also host textile recycling activations, educational workshops like our What's the Future of Textile Waste symposium that we launched and kicked off last year with the help of some folks on this call. So thank you for those who have played a role in some of the things we've executed in community. Since launching, we've actually been able to redirect over 32,000 pounds of textile waste from landfills. Our advocate and training program is an arm of that, because we are able to also task them with doing something in their community that extends our reach as an organization. We do believe fashion can be a good force for socially, environmentally, and culturally responsive action and environmental justice. So thank you for supporting our work. You do see on the slide deck, we do have our website, thechayamovement.com, and you can follow us on social media to see what we have going on. Thanks.
Thank you, Zakia. You're doing the most, and I also appreciate your holistic approach and thoughtfulness. So next is Cleo Escaris, founder of Reduce.
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah,
Yes.
and 1 minute, please. Thank
Oh,
you.
yes. I'll make this really quick. I am here to talk to you guys about circular economy in the jewelry and accessories world. So I am the founder of Reduce, and what we do is we recover precious metals from jewelry, and we are positioning ourselves as an urban mine. And one way to really think about this and why it's important to think about jewelry and recycling it is that it shares precious metals, and precious metals are finite resources. And it's actually shared across other industries, which is why it's quite important for us to really make sure that we're recovering as much as we possibly can. And as it stands, the jewelry industry takes up about 40 to 50% of our global supply of silver and gold. So we believe that the jewelry industry is a really good pathway to supply other technologies. That's quite important for us to thrive in the future, particularly green technology. So solar panels, urban wind turbines are really where we're trying to make sure that they have enough materials to manufacture future creations of this. So we recycle jewelry, both fashion and fine, and we do it under the circularity model. For fashion jewelry, we partner with our local nonprofits and donate it to Dress for Success is one of them, where they'll give it to their members and or they'll resell it to fund their nonprofit. And we've also partnered with organizations that like Tim was holding up to this week or this month, which is community events for swaps and things like that, or art projects, where we really want to ensure that we're extending the life cycle of these jewelry and does not end up to landfills. That's what we do. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Cleo. We really appreciate you taking essentially like a waste stream and putting it into really useful products like solar panels. So our fourth breakout room will be on community engagement and outreach. We move on to Sylvain Bucher.
Perfect. Okay. My name is Sylvain Bucher. I'm the King County Solid Waste Division's RePlus Program Manager. RePlus is King County's Zero Waste Resources Initiative. That is a system-wide approach to building a healthy environment and economy by reinventing our system of waste management. RePlus includes numerous, what we call RePlus actions that range in focus from policy processing, grants, city and community engagement, etc. And one of our RePlus actions is the RePlus Community Panel, which began in March 2022 and is a group of 12 frontline community members who meet monthly to provide input on RePlus planning, programming, and implementation, sharing their experience and lived experience and expertise, and ultimately helping us chart a path together towards a more equitable, waste-free King County. And I've personally had the pleasure of supporting program management of the RePlus Community Panel in concert with our Equity, Inclusion, and Belonging team. Some very quick context. King County knows that it's very, very critical that our new circular waste system is built and being built with the input of frontline communities that have been most affected by the climate and environmental and other social impacts of our current linear waste system. So as one of King County Solid Waste Division's efforts to gain these value perspectives, we are working with a community panel to ensure our path to a circular economy is inclusive and brings historically overlooked voices to the forefront. And that panel is, as I mentioned, the RePlus Community Panel, which I am here to share a bit more about in the breakout room. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Great presentation. Do we get Whit back? Can I get an audio?
Yes, hello.
Okay, go ahead.
Great. Hello. Yes, I'm from the West Seattle Food Bank. I'm the development coordinator there. We run a program called the West Seattle Clothesline, which we inherited when we merged with the West Seattle Helpline back in 2020. The Clothesline is a free clothing bank. It is like a little mini thrift store, full self-selection, men's, women's, kids, all ages, all sizes. Everyone is welcome. We receive almost all of our clothing in donations, hopefully working to keep things out of the landfill and from being one-time use. We distribute more than 84,000 pieces of clothing in a year, and that is only going up. And we also partner with Goodwill for pickups of things that we can't use. So nothing that gets donated to us ends up in waste.
That's awesome. It's great to know that there's a place for people to go before they go to Goodwill. So thank you so much for that, Whit. And lastly, we have Nivi from Soapbox. 1 minute, and then we're going to jump into break rooms. Thank you all so much.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for welcoming me. My name is Nivya Chanta. I am the founder and CEO of an organization called Soapbox Project, and we are building the world's #1 most joyful spaces for climate action. And if you don't believe me, you should just come and check it out. So in the breakout, I would love to talk about how we can build the biggest, brightest, most colorful coalition, because I believe that everybody, except maybe billionaires, does care about the planet and care about each other. And so we shouldn't just be seeing people that work professionally or consider themselves already activists in the movement. And so we are trying to build a space that feels like a dinner party, like climate church, and really just develop a greater culture of care in the Pacific Northwest and beyond. So I'm really excited to chat more, meet all of you, learn from all of you, and thank you for having me, T, and everyone else.
Thank you so much. Caleb, we'll be doing 20 minutes for the breakout rooms. Any notes before we jump in?
Yeah, just to note that the breakout rooms will not be recorded, just to help facilitate that open discussion and engagement.
Wonderful, you all. Thank you again to all our panelists, all of our attendees. That's a wrap. Until the next time. Bye-bye, everyone.
Have a great day, everyone, and thank you so much for joining.